Hi, I'm Neil Saunders and welcome to this week's edition of Retail Perspectives. What I want to talk about this week is something that we've seen over the past 10 years a lot more of in retail, and that's international expansion. In the UK, we've seen a lot of foreign retailers come into the United Kingdom to trade, and of course we've seen a lot of our own retailers expand abroad in Asia and the Americas and elsewhere. Now, I think when we look at international expansion, there are three drivers behind this quite rapid growth over the past 10 years. One of them is a range of push factors, and that's really centred around the fact that most Western economies are fairly mature. So growth is quite difficult to come by. Whereas if you look at the foreign economies, some of the emerging markets in Asia or Latin America, growth rates are of course a lot stronger. And that creates the second factor, which is a pull factor to those countries. And just to illustrate that fact, if you look at retail expenditure growth across Europe from 2012 to 2016, it's about 22-23%. However, if you look at Asia, for example, growth rates there are about 64% over the same period, and in Latin America, they're about 52%. So you can see the attractiveness of some of those markets. They're very high growth markets. A lot of middle class consumers are coming and starting to consume more seriously and more professionally, and that's boosting a lot of sectors, and that's very attractive to retailers whose own markets are fairly saturated, fairly competitive, and fairly low growth. So those are two dynamics which have supported that rise of internationalisation. But the third thing is probably a range of factors which come under the sort of title of facilitating factors, and those would include things like the internet. And of course what the internet has done is it's given brands and retailers a lot of exposure in foreign countries even before they've necessarily opened their doors. And if you think about Abercrombie and Fitch, which came to the UK some time ago now, it was quite well known in the UK well before that, simply because of its online presence and the fact that people were able to connect with the brand in that way. So that sort of common culture and sharing of cultures through online and the internet has really facilitated foreign expansion much more than it did in the past. So those are the reasons why it's grown. But just because it's grown doesn't mean to say that it's easy, because actually there are quite a lot of challenges around international expansion. The first one, of course, is choosing where to go, because there are a lot of potential targets, and not all markets are necessarily right for retail expansion. So within Europe, for example, if you looked at Germany as a market, which is a fairly popular destination, yes, it is a very big market, yes, it has high growth relative to a lot of other Western counterparts. However, it is a very competitive market. It's a very value-oriented market from the consumer point of view, and it is very, very difficult for retailers to get into that market and crack it in a successful way. And we've seen players like Walmart try and fail, and that shows the potential issues, because a player as big as Walmart not being able to make it shows that it actually isn't easy to expand abroad if you don't choose the right target market. So choosing the market and making sure that it's aligned with your business and that you feel you can trade there successfully is really the first thing. The second thing is about how you expand into those markets, because there are a lot of options and not all of them are right for all retailers, and retailers need to think very carefully about the expansion method they choose. If you look at Tesco with its venture in the US, Fresh and Easy, they focus on opening physical stores. They owned the business, they expanded themselves. It was very capitally intensive, and obviously it ultimately failed and it cost the business a lot of money. So under that model they had a lot of control, but it was a very costly route to expansion that when it didn't succeed actually had a negative effect on the company's balance sheet. However, if you look at other methods like franchising, that has much lower risk, it requires much less capital, and it allows much more rapid expansion over a short period of time. It also brings you local expertise, because you can partner with a franchisee who knows the market, who perhaps already runs retail stores there. And we've seen a lot of retailers, including players like Mothercare, using that route for expansion, and we've seen a lot of that around Middle Eastern markets, and actually it's proved to be quite successful. But of course even that has its issues, because with a franchise partner you're not in full control, you might have brand and licensing issues. If you then want to open a website into those markets, there may be issues if you've got franchisees running stores. So those things need to be very carefully worked out before expansion takes place. So there's lots of methods of expansion, but retailers really need to think very carefully about the one that's right for them and right for their business, not just now, but over the longer term as well. The final thing I think that retailers need to consider is the matter of culture, because retail is very different across different markets, and it can be the smallest thing, the smallest nuance that makes the difference between success and failure. So if you look at Germany, for example, as a market, if you're online in Germany, actually credit cards are not that common a payment method. Most people prefer to be invoiced after they have received the goods, which is a hangover from the old German mail order model, which was very predominant in the country. That's completely alien to British retailers who do not use that method. However, if they're expanding into that market, they need to very carefully consider that, because not offering that service or not offering equivalent payment options actually can reduce the potential success of the business. So all of the small cultural issues, all of the small technical issues around how people pay for things, how people buy things, consumer tastes, are really important. And that's actually one of the things that retailers have found most difficult. If you look at Walmart's venture with Seiyu in Japan, for example, some time ago, one of the real difficulties there was just a complete misunderstanding of the consumer psyche. Walmart, of course, in its core territories of America and through Asda in Europe, is used to selling a lot of product to consumers, often in bulk, and that allows them to have low prices, which is part of the whole proposition, that EDLP piece. However, Japan is a very different market. Most consumers, especially in big urban areas, do not have big homes. They do not buy in bulk because they don't have space to store things like water or juice in a bulk way. They will buy very piecemeal, and they'll buy in a small hand-to-mouth type fashion. And that, of course, means the business model changes completely. And it's those small local issues, although they may seem very localised, that actually can be the difference between success and failure for retail businesses. Because whilst things have become more international and culture has become more even, retail is about those small details, and those small details on an international level are still very local.